Welcome to Retirement Decoded with your host, Scott Tucker, where we break down the complexities of retirement planning to give you clear, actionable advice. Whether you're just starting out or getting ready to retire, Scott's here to help you make informed decisions and secure your financial future. Tune in each week as we simplify the process and decode the path to a stress-free retirement. Now, here's your host, Scott Tucker.
And we're back. Welcome back to the podcast, Retirement Decoded with Scott Tucker. I'm your host, Scott Tucker, and my podcast sidekick, as most of the time, is Associate Advisor Andriy Hootie. Say hello, Andriy Hootie.
Hello, Andriy Hootie.
Andriy Hootie, I tell you what, Barb's got a question for us today on the Retirement Decoded podcast. By the way, if you want to get on our phone calendar to ask us your retirement planning questions, go to tuckerretirement.com at tuckerretirement.com, and we'll have a link down below. You can click and pick a time on our calendar, schedule yourself right there. We'll spend 15 minutes for free with you over the telephone in the coming week with one of our financial planners. We're based in Chicago, but we help folks all throughout the United States and its territories. We're federally licensed. So Barb writes the podcast, Andriy. She says, Scott and Andriy, we went perhaps too big on Roth conversion last year. It was the same year that we started our Social Security retirement. Now there's something new on our TurboTax return. Andriy, should you, you're going into retirement or retirement-ish age. You're doing Roth conversions. You're firing up your Social Security. You got your TurboTax. Are you doing too much yourself?
It sounds like it.
Barb, what's happening now is your taxes are getting too complicated, and you're still doing TurboTax.
Yeah, that's.
I'm not teasing her. You laugh at her. Don't laugh at Barb.
Well, TurboTax, it's great for the simple things, but man, I've used TurboTax myself, and my taxes, when I was 18, are very different than when they are now. I had one tax return back then, but the more you get, and if you're doing
one W-2 back then,
yeah,
you're 18,
and when you're doing Roth conversion, it's everything. I applaud you. This is
I don't applaud her. Barb's crazy.
Well, at least she's trying.
Barb, if you're crazy,
I suggest an advisor.
Barb, if you're crazy, go to tuckerretirement.com. Get our phone calendar.
Maybe she's an
she says we went perhaps too big on Roth conversion last year. It was the same year that we started Social Security retirement. Andriy, we usually like to separate those two, don't we?
Yeah.
Roth conversions are federally taxable at ordinary income tax rates. If you do them in the same tax year as you receive Social Security retirement, you can cause federal taxation of up to 85% of your Social Security retirement.
Yeah.
They don't tell you that in high school, do they, Andriy?
No, they don't. Those are just unnecessary.
I know you went to college and so on and so forth, but they don't tell you that in middle school.
They don't tell you that in college either.
They actually don't tell you that, do they?
No, I took the amount of finance classes I took and portfolio management and all that. Not once do they touch Social Security.
They never, the professor at Loyola Chicago, they never knew, they didn't know about 85% federal taxation of Social Security?
No, they didn't.
Caused by Roth conversion.
It's, they're setting you up to fail over there, apparently.
My mom says, my mom and I differ politically, but one thing she says that's very wise, she says, they don't want you to be too smart.
Yeah, well,
conspiracy theory, Mom. Mom usually doesn't have the conspiracy theories. There's one.
We should go offline with her and talk about that more because I've got some ideas.
So Barb says we went perhaps too big on Roth conversion last year. It was the same year that we started collecting Social Security retirement. We like to separate those because the Roth conversion is federally taxable and it can cause federal income taxes on up to 85% of your Social Security. So there's that. Now there's something new on our TurboTax return. Barb, you have graduated TurboTax.
Yeah.
Now here's the problem. Nowadays, you've got to find a CPA or an enrolled agent that still is taking new clients, that isn't retiring tomorrow, and that they know what's going on with Roth conversions and that they ought to, and all that. But the problem... the problem is when you go to that CPA or that enrolled agent and they take you on as a client, you're doing this cleanup an aisle 3 routine. You want them to clean up something you already did. And that's how most folks probably misuse a CPA or enrolled agent. And as a result, that whole profession, that tax return preparation profession is all about clean up an aisle 3. There's never a look ahead. And what a financial planner does is look ahead and say, well, we got to talk about Roth conversions, and then we got to talk about Social Security retirement, and we probably ought to separate them.
Yeah.
Andriy, there was a McDonald's burger in the 1980s called the McDLT. You've not heard of it?
I have not heard of that.
You're a little bit younger than me. the McDLT, they had it like one of those styrofoam clamshells that are now like illegal in California or something. And the whole it was kind of gimmicky. They go, we keep the hot side hot and the cold side cold.
Oh,
so it was, which is weird because now one bun is cold. But anyway, so they had, you'd open this styrofoam clamshell thing, and your McDLT had a hot side and had a cold side. So on the bottom bun and the burger are the hot side.
Okay.
Right. And then the other side has like a cold bun top for no reason. They never said anything about that being cold. Oh, that was good. And then it had the lettuce and tomato was cold over there. Oh, so McDonald's was like, we're not going to make a better burger, but it'll have a hot side and a cold side.
Well, sell it differently, you know.
You're welcome. Yeah. And then, hey, and how about you get the type 2 diabetes with a big old Coke Classic, or that might have been before the Coke Classic. I don't know. There was a time when they changed the Coke formula, and then they had the new Coke, and then they brought back the old Coke, and they called it Coke Classic. It's very confusing. The 80s were a tough time. There were parachute pants and Michael Jackson and a bunch of weird stuff going on. Oh boy. So Barb, you've graduated TurboTax. Now, if you go find a CPA or an enrolled agent to do your tax returns, you may find a whole bunch of them are not taking new clients. And then the ones who are taking new clients are charging about $700 to do tax returns, what we're finding. But $700 to get it right, or do you want to do this for several years where every year the IRS is chasing you saying you screwed it up?
Mm-hmm.
TurboTax is not so hot for everything. And TurboTax is actually an amazing software program. You got to give them a little credit. But Barb, you've gone beyond. She says, now we're paying a tax on net investment income. Net investment income, that's a tax of 3.8%. Now that was part of the Affordable Care Act, Andriy. Mm-hmm. Wanted to make the health care more affordable. What makes health care more affordable than a new tax of 3.8% for people like Barb? Well, it's not all free, is it, Andriy?
Well, the government has a weird way of thinking about things, you know?
Yeah. So now we have a tax called net investment income because our adjusted gross income was over $250,000 US dollars. Mm-hmm. It was, I always say US dollars, makes me sound more important, like I'm on Bloomberg or something.
Right. Well,
let's see what kind of dollars it is. Well, they are.
You never know where people are listening.
Yeah, you know. It was a... Then she says it was a small amount. Oh, the net investment income tax. So that's 3.8% on $250,000. That's not a small amount.
It's not. Well, maybe for her it's small, but
just chump change. That's like, boy, it's not chump change. Wow. She says it was a small amount, but a surprise to us. So in addition to tax brackets and IRMA, which are high income Medicare penalties. So in addition to tax brackets and IRMA considerations, we've got one more threshold to think about. Does this sound like Barb's a do-it-herselfer?
Oh, yeah.
And no, this is getting too complicated.
I think there's going to be pitfalls that she's not going to see.
Well, we already know that.
Yeah.
So big Roth conversion the same year as Social Security retirement. Then there's a net investment income tax. And then they had to pay that net investment income tax. In addition to those, and then she's worried about tax brackets and Medicare high income penalties, which are called IRMA considerations. And I think it's getting overwhelming.
Yeah.
What's this? This is strange to see an additional tax calculated on our already taxed interest. Oh, that's cute. Barb thought that certain taxes are only paid by other people.
Oh, yeah. Every time they get a chance to tax you, they will.
This is like when I was 16 at Schmidt's grocery store in Lansing, Michigan, northeast corner of Waverly and Saginaw. Schmidt's grocery store. And I got my first check, and there was a 4-letter word starts with F. FICA. I thought only old people paid for Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah,
not 16-year-olds. So anyway, this is strange to see an additional tax calculated on our already taxed interest. Barb, you've become what they call a fat cat.
Yep.
Congratulations.
They're looking at you to pay all the money.
Andriy, how do you say fat cat in Spanish? It's something gato.
Oh, grande gato? I don't know.
It's something or other gato. Yeah, we have a couple of clients. We have one from Guatemala, and a couple from Peru and stuff. And we'll talk about taxes and like, wow, those taxes. If we don't do this, it'll be like that. And I say, yeah, they think you're the fat cat. And I say, and I've asked them each of them before, how do you say fat cat in Spanish? And they say it. We all get a chuckle out of it, except for it's not fun to be the fat cat when you get a new tax.
No, yeah. When you're single-handedly, dealing with the government's deficit, it's not fun.
And I've not asked them. I think fat cat might be an English phrase that maybe they don't use in Spanish. I mean, somebody in the Spanish-speaking world has a fat cat.
Right.
And somebody that has a fat cat has a tax they didn't expect.
Yeah.
They don't actually tax it. You know, the thing about that, they don't actually tax the fat cat.
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress, finally. It's strange to see an additional tax calculated on our already taxed interest. Boy, you felt like you gave it the office, don't you? You feel like you get to pay twice. Since higher incomes are already more highly taxed, and I'm fine with that. Oh, boy, I don't know if I'm fine with that. Yeah. At some point, Andriy, don't you feel like you paid enough in taxes?
Yeah, you would think.
Boy. At some point, it's not your job to subsidize the rest of the world.
Right. I mean, if you're working hard and making money, that's, everybody else can do that too.
I don't really feel like retirees ought to float the boat for everybody else.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
Since higher incomes are already more highly taxed, and I'm fine with that, it seems like everything should already be taken care of. That's cute again, Andriy. You can tell that Barb was never self-employed.
Yeah.
Right? When you're self-employed, boy, you get to learn all the things, how complicated all the things really are. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's fun. Ask me how I know.
There's so many extra taxes.
Well, everything is a pain in the keister.
Yeah.
When you're an employee and everything's kind of taken out for you and calculated this way and that way, and when you actually have to look under the hood how the sausage is made and the payroll taxes run and there's all these, there's actually there's taxes the employer pays that are not on the employee's pay stub.
Yeah.
And that's probably for political reasons, I guess. But
probably.
The more you know, you're like, whoa. Well, it is if you want to keep the employees mad at the employer and get votes going one direction instead of the other, then spin up that whole story about how the boss is evil, has horns under his hat, and I don't have a hat. See, that's why I don't have hair either.
Well, you don't have horns.
I don't have a hat, horns, or hair.
Yeah, well.
For those of you in Peoria, I am short and bald. Ladies, take it easy. Natalie, if you're listening, you go to tuckerretirement.com, get in my phone calendar, and you can scold me for. Andriy, I said something. We also have a radio show in Chicago, and I one Sunday morning you were off from the radio show, and I said, well, Andriy's he's romancing Lauren today because he's figured out it's cheaper to keep her, and she heard that on the radio. Oh, okay. And she goes, you can't say that. I go, what? It is cheaper to keep her. She's like, that's terrible.
Oh, man.
I'm like, well, Lauren doesn't listen to the show, so.
Oh, man, I wish I was there for that conversation.
You can't say it's cheaper to keep her. Well, am I wrong?
No, you're not.
I think it's wise to keep her.
Yeah.
Lauren's lovely, and you should keep her, and it'll also be cheaper. So Barb says, it seems like everything should be already taken care of. That's cute. That's the part that's naive. We had a question I think it was on last week's episode of the podcast where a lady said she thought she was maybe just being naive. Now, Barb's being naive. It's Pick on Barb Day.
Yeah, just a little. It's those taxes, if they can keep throwing them at you, they will. There's never an end.
Really.
Oh,
and the more money you make, the less. That's the thing, too. You get to be. Most people don't save for retirement, and the ones that do, or that do in substantial numbers, substantial dollar figures, are then in the minority, and you only need so many votes to get elected. So that's kind of how it works being self-employed too. The politicians don't need everybody's vote, and most people aren't self-employed, or most people don't save for retirement. So even though maybe the people who save for retirement might be more of means to donate to your opponent, or maybe the self-employed people, if they have any spare time, they might be more riled up and join like the NFIB or whatever, like the one of these business groups to get you out of office. But if you're just going for votes, the votes are at the masses, and so the more difficult things in life, paperwork and tax return wise and things like tax wise. Well, they can't tax broke people, Andriy. They've tried. Yeah. It's hard to get broke people to pay taxes.
Well,
right?
Hard to squeeze juice out of the lemon that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, even though I worked at Schmidt's grocery store when I was 16, there's only so much FICA they could get out of me. I was making $3.15 an hour back in 1989.
Oh, that's big bucks.
Minimum wage. There's only so much FICA you can get out of that. And then Barb says, do you know the reason behind this weirdness? Well, I think I've asked and answered that one.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Wonderful country we live in, Andriy. And longtime listeners of the podcast may know, Andriy, that you moved to this country when you were 3 years of age from Ukraine with your parents, and your grandparents on your mom's side preceded you by 1 year.
Yep.
Right? Question mark. So you came here when you were 3, and you've been here a long time now. Now you're when you were 19, you became a citizen, all of your own volition.
Yep. Yeah.
That's a big word, like your own
Studied
willpower.
for the test and all that.
They asked you, like, who's George Washington?
They did. Well, actually, it's
Who was George Washington?
they didn't actually quiz me. They didn't actually give me the test. They came in, heard that I didn't have an accent, heard I could answer every question. They're like, "You're good."
You're like, I went to Downers Grove South, home of the Mustangs, played American football at right tackle.
Yep.
You get that whole sentence out, and they're like, "Oh, you pass."
Yeah, he's like, "Go see window 2 for your."
They're like,
certificate."
they're like when I was in the Navy. Okay, here you go, kid. Top secret clearance.
Yeah.
They actually did an investigation. That was a whole other thing about that. So when I was 17, I signed up for to enlist in the Navy. He became a cryptologist. It's a code breaker, and I had to have my mom sign off on it. My parents were divorced. And then I saw my dad like a month later, and he goes, "You're not going in the Navy?" I go, "Yeah, I am. Mom already signed off on the permission slip thing." He's like, "What?" Because my dad was in Vietnam, so he's like, "What is this?"
He knew.
I'm like, "Dad, it's not like back then. There's no draft in that." And my dad actually volunteered during the draft. Oh boy, what a knucklehead, huh? My dad volunteered for the Navy. Then he volunteered to be a Navy corpsman, which is hospital corpsman. And then the Marine Corps is part of the Navy, but the Marine Corps doesn't have any medical people. So then my dad got a no expense. All expense paid trip to Vietnam with the 4th Division Marines. You get to see great places like Da Nang and all that stuff.
Well, thank you for your service.
That's my dad's service.
Well, both yours and
Then
your
I have
dad's
my own service.
Yeah, both your services.
I forget why I was talking about all that, Andriy. Oh, yeah. So then what's funny, so on that ASVAB, let's just tell the story time for a minute. That ASVAB, you can score like 0 to 100 or 0 to 99, something like that. And so I scored an 84, which means I scored higher than the other 84% of the other folks that took the test. And when you score like in the 80s or so, they're like, "Well, do you want to be a cryptologist?" I go, "What's that?" "Code breaker." I'm like, "That sounds hard." And I said, "Don't worry about it." And then but they have to get you a top secret code word clearance, special compartment of information and all this stuff. And so they go talk to, you give them five the names of 5 friends where you grew up, and they go to those 5 friends and they ask them for 5 friends, and they end up talking to friends that you don't want them to talk to.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm like, "You can go talk to Ralph Garver." And Ralph's like, "Yeah, go talk to Mark Ely." "No, don't talk to Mark." There's certain friends that had certain hobbies in high school.
Yeah, it's
and
sure.
And that I could not. There's certain times I couldn't be certain places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go home now because I knew I was going to go to the Navy. I needed a top secret clearance.
Yeah.
Well, Mark turned out fine in the end. This is when you're like 18. When I went to boot camp, and they wait till you get through boot camp. They do this right around somewhere in there. They wait till you graduate boot camp, and then they very quickly go talk to all these people. And if you live in different states, they go to different states. They go talk to teachers. I'm like, man, you should talk to some of these teachers. I was a bit of a class clown and stuff.
Well, yeah,
and you should talk. You should talk to. You should go talk to Barry Clonehammer. Please don't talk to Mary Bryman. Or was that her name? There's certain teachers, fine teachers, all
right,
but there are teachers that liked me and I liked them, and there's other teachers that they're like, "Do you just shut up?"
They just didn't appreciate the humor.
Well, you're a teenager. It's not your finest hour,
right? It's everybody does frowned upon.
I mean,
things.
there's nothing that would deem me to be untrustworthy with the secrets of our nation. But it was funny.
Yeah.
We also had a thing. I went to these vocational these cryptologic schools in Pensacola, Florida, at Corey Station. Now it's like the Center for Information Warfare Dominance something. They have some crazy name to it.
Oh wow.
The Center for Cyber something doohickeys.
Sounds complicated.
And it's something else. They're always putting fancy names on stuff. But there was always like one kid that was like in a holding company that he couldn't, what they call class up, because he was still waiting on his clearance. There's this one kid from like Philadelphia, and I'm like, so who are they talking to back home? Why do you still not have your clearance? He's like, "Man, I don't know." He's like, he was from a rougher area.
Yeah.
He goes, I don't know who they're talking to. I don't know what. He's like, I kept my nose clean. I don't know who they're talking to, what people are telling them. He's like, I've been here, like, I'm about a couple months into this, like, waiting on my clearance. He got held up for his clearance, where usually they get them done pretty quickly once they knew you got through boot camp.
So, hey, how do they make sure nobody's lying about you? You know, what if somebody just hates you and they just tell all sorts of tall tales?
Well, you do give them your 5 friends to talk to. So they at least have 5 people that tell them good stuff.
But after that,
but then they actually went and interviewed. They interviewed managers. There's a drugstore I worked at, A.L. Price on Saginaw Highway. That's west of Waverly Road. There used to be A.L. Price. It was one of those jumbo. At some point in the late 80s, there were like these jumbo super big box like drugstores. But they sold like shampoo. Like, hey, you want 5 gallons of shampoo? They all weird stuff. And they went and talked to that manager. It was funny because later on I did a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request with the Defense Investigative Service. And it took like years. And then one day a manila envelope shows up and it's got 100 pages in it. It's like, I don't know, what's that, like a half a ream of paper?
Yeah.
And it said Defense Investigative Service on it. And it had like a label with my name and address on there. It took years to get it. I can't remember, it was like 8 years or something. So they don't have to immediately give you your file, but they eventually have to give you your file. And it had in there everybody I talked to and everything they said.
Wow.
And the manager from A.L. Price, that it's not there anymore, it was those jumbo drugstore places. They had his name and stuff in there, and he said I had a chip on my shoulder.
Which was good for the military.
Well, what I thought was funny about that, this was a pretty big store. It was actually a great job because all we did was we were just like working as stockers, which is way easier being like a grocery bagger. Just being a stocker, like I'd go in like afternoon after school, into the evening, and it was mostly all stocking stuff. Like we had to build like this giant paper towel display, and it went up like 30 feet. There were no OSHA rules back then, I don't think, because they had a bunch of high school kids. There was like 6 or 8 of us working on this. And like, so you'd have, you know how they cut the box open so you can see the paper towel and stuff. Right. And then eventually there has to be somebody up there putting more paper towel on top of the paper towel on top of the paper towel. Well, there's no like 65-year-old's going to come in there and say, hey, I want the paper towel from the top of the pyramid.
Right.
Or nobody's going to say, wow, that's an awesome pyramid. I have to have more paper towel. Say I need more cowbell. So we're building this thing and somehow something happened, something slipped, and I was at the top of the pyramid. And all the paper towel came tumbling down.
No.
And it's like everywhere. And so I landed safe because I landed on top of all this paper towel. And there's a couple of us kind of in this mix. And this poor guy, he's like got a wife and kids, and he's like, these idiots. And then so he's like, what was all that? And I grab one thing of paper towel, like one roll of paper towel, hold it over my head, and I say, bingo. And I think he didn't like me from that.
Well,
I mean, because we had to rebuild this thing. It took forever. But then when they went back to interview him after I hadn't worked there in like a year. Mm-hmm. So I also thought that that perhaps he got me mixed up with somebody else.
Maybe.
So he's like, oh, that kid had a chip on his shoulder. I'm like, every shift he had like 8 kids.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Isn't that a horrible job? He not only had the 8 kids, then he had like doing all the stocking stuff. Then he had probably 4 or 5. Then he had like 4 or 5 cashiers or whatever. There was somebody who tried to pass a $5 bill that was a counterfeit. So then he has the police there.
Right. Oh.
And then all this stuff going on. And then, so how could he keep straight the 8 stalkers that he had?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like this kid goes to DeWitt, that kid goes to Grand Ledge, this kid goes to Waverly.
There's a reason you guys got to run wild, I think.
Yeah, that was a cool job. So anywho, you've wasted yet another good, 23 minutes this time, listening to the ramblings of a short, bald man, namely yours truly, Scott Tucker. Get on our phone calendar. We'll actually talk about your retirement planning. Go to tuckerretirement.com. At tuckerretirement.com, you can see our phone calendar. Click and pick a time and schedule yourself right there. And we'll talk to you on the next podcast. What would really help us, share the episode, text it to a friend, put it on Facebook, give us a thumbs up, and then we'll talk to you on the next episode. And it's been fun. It's been real. It's been real fun. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. has a strategic partnership with tax professionals and attorneys who can provide tax and or legal advice. Neither the firm nor its agents or representatives may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions. A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA. The views and opinions herein are those of Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of AE Wealth Management, LLC. Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AEWM and Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. are not subject to investment advisory requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this podcast shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc.